What does it feel like to be erased from your own family? I used to think I knew my siblings Lila, Marcus, and Tessa like the back of my hand. Growing up in our small, creaky house in Vermont, we were a unit, bound by late-night whispers, shared secrets, and the kind of laughter that makes your sides ache. But families, like old photographs, fade and crack over time. By the time I was 28, I was standing on the outside of their lives, uninvited, unwanted, and unsure of where it all went wrong. It started with Lila's wedding. She was the eldest, the one who always played mom when mom was working late. Her engagement to Tom was a whirlwind, and I was thrilled to help plan her big day. I spent weeks sketching table settings, suggesting playlists, even offering to bake the cake. But 2 months before the wedding, Lila called me. Her voice was cold, clipped. "Clara, I'm sorry, but we've decided to keep the guest list small. Family only. Immediate family." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. I was her sister. How much more immediate could I get? But the silence on the other end told me it wasn't a joke. I wasn't invited. No explanation, no apology beyond those flat words. I hung up, my hands shaking, and cried until dawn. Marcus was next. His wedding was a year later, a lavish affair in a vineyard. I thought maybe Lila's exclusion was a fluke, a budget thing. So I texted Marcus, offering to help with anything ushering, speeches, even just setting up chairs. He didn't respond. Days later, I got a formal email from his fiancée, Claire, saying the venue had strict capacity limits. I saw the photos on social media, our cousins, aunts, uncles, even childhood friends I hadn't seen in years, all toasting to Marcus's happiness. But not me. I was nowhere in the frame. Tessa's wedding was the final blow. She was the youngest, my confidant, the one I'd stayed up with through her teenage heartbreaks. I didn't even bother offering to help this time. I waited for an invitation that never came. Instead, I got a text a week before the event, "Clara, I'm sorry, but it's just not the right time for you to be there." Not the right time? I scrolled through her wedding hashtag, my chest tight, watching my family dance and laugh without me. 3 weddings. 3 doors slammed in my face. I stopped trying to understand why. I stopped calling. I stopped hoping. The years that followed were quiet. I moved to a small apartment in Boston, built a life with a few close friends, and threw myself into my work as a graphic designer. I tried to bury the hurt, but it lingered like a bruise that never quite heals. I'd lie awake at night, replaying childhood memories, searching for the moment I became the outcast. Was it something I said? Something I did? Or was it just me, inherently unworthy of their love? Then, out of nowhere, a twist arrived in the form of Mrs. Delaney. She was my neighbor, a spry 70-year-old with a penchant for gardening and unsolicited advice. One evening, as I watered her roses while she recovered from a hip surgery, she fixed me with a knowing look. "Clara, you've got a heavy heart. I can see it in your eyes. Families can be cruel, but they don't get to define you." I brushed it off, but she pressed on. "You know, my brother and I didn't speak for 20 years. Petty stuff. Money, pride, old grudges. I thought I'd lost him forever until he showed up at my door one Christmas, crying like a baby. Sometimes, people just need time to remember what matters." Her words stuck with me, a tiny seed of hope I wasn't ready to nurture. But they shifted something. I started to see my siblings' rejection not as a verdict on my worth, but as a reflection of their own choices, their own flaws. I couldn't control their actions, but I could control mine. And so, when I met Ethan, everything changed. Ethan was a carpenter, warm and steady, with a laugh that could light up a room. We met at a friend's art gallery opening, bonding over our shared love of old jazz records. He didn't push me to talk about my family, but when I finally did, he listened without judgment. "You're enough, Clara," he said one night, his hand over mine. "You don't need their approval to shine." For the first time, I believed it. We got engaged on a rainy afternoon, under an oak tree in a park near my apartment. It wasn't grand or flashy, just us and a promise. Planning our wedding was a quiet joy, picking wildflowers for the centerpiece, designing our own invitations, choosing a small venue by a lake. I didn't tell my siblings. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need them there to make it real. This was my day, my life, my happiness. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror, my dress simple but elegant, a single daisy tucked into my hair. Mrs. Delaney, who'd insisted on being my unofficial wedding planner, adjusted my veil with tears in her eyes. "You're a vision, Clara. And you're not alone today." She was right. My friends filled the chairs, their faces glowing with love. Ethan's family welcomed me like one of their own. Even Mrs. Delaney's estranged brother, now reconciled, showed up with a bottle of homemade wine and a story about second chances. As I walked down the aisle, Ethan's eyes locked on mine, and I felt whole. The ceremony was intimate, filled with laughter and a few happy tears. We danced under string lights, the lake reflecting the stars, and I realized I wasn't missing anything. My siblings' absence wasn't a void, it was just space for the people who chose to be there. Days after the wedding, I got a text from Tessa. "Heard you got married. Congrats, I guess." No apology, no warmth. I stared at the message, waiting for the old hurt to resurface. It didn't. I typed back, "Thanks. I wish you well." And I meant it. I didn't need their regret or their validation anymore. I had built a family of my own, not bound by blood, but by choice. Mrs. Delaney's words echoed in my mind as I deleted Tessa's message. Families can be cruel, but they don't get to define you. I thought about my siblings, about the weddings I wasn't invited to, about the years of silence. Maybe one day they'd reach out, like Mrs. Delaney's brother did, ready to mend what was broken. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I was done waiting. I looked at Ethan, asleep beside me, the moonlight tracing the lines of his face. I thought of the life we were building, the love that filled the spaces my siblings left behind. And I knew, with a clarity that felt like freedom, that I was enough. My wedding wasn't a retaliation or a statement. It was a celebration of who I was, who I'd become, and who I'd chosen to surround myself with. So, to my siblings, who banned me from their weddings and never got a text for mine, I hope you find your peace. I've found mine. And it's more beautiful than I ever imagined.